Welcome to Barnes & Noble. Welcome for a very special event. Tonight we have Pulitzer Prize winning James B. Stewart. He has written a previous bestseller, Den of Thieves, and his current book is right here, Bloodsport. It's a book that is very well researched. It is, and still reads like a novel with as much suspense as you could ask for, and is an insight into character. I think that it's a very interesting book about the whirligig of politics today, and so it is my great pleasure to introduce James B. Stewart.
Thank you. Thanks very much for joining me. After being on the book tour, it's such a pleasure to have you for at least a few minutes as a captive audience, and to at least put off for a few minutes your questions. I'm so used, in fact, some people say, well, what's the question you get the most? And the question I get the most is, would you summarize your book in 2 sentences? And the true answer is no. But of course, I have to try to do that. It was just about a little over 2 years ago today that I got a visit in my office here in New York from Susan Thomas's, who I knew very slightly from some previous interaction when she was the managing partner at Wilkie Farr and I was working for American Lawyer magazine. But otherwise, it came as something of a surprise to me that she was such a close confidant of the Clintons and of the inner circle in the White House. Now that is well known, since her phone records have all been produced in Congress. I'm surprised nobody found my phone number on there and wanted to know what it was doing there, but I didn't get any questions. Phone records that showed her making so many calls that now I understand why she had this nickname in the White House of the Midnight Caller, since she was freely calling in at all hours of the day and night. But when she came to visit me, she plunged into a discussion of the Clintons and how beleaguered they felt, how upset they were by the scandals that just simply would not go away, which they had difficulty understanding, their distress at their coverage in the mainstream media, and what they saw as something of a right-wing conspiracy that seemed most effective just when they were about to make some progress on their legislative front. And she said that, desperate to do something to get this behind them, they had hit on the idea of turning to a well-known journalist who wasn't part of the inside Washington press corps, who wasn't attached to a major media organization that had already staked out a position on the Clinton administration, somebody who knew something about business and financial stories, somebody with a reputation that would ensure national coverage for their work, and somebody with a reputation that meant that the work would be taken seriously and would have credibility. She never exactly said that I was that person, but as I saw the universe narrowing and narrowing and narrowing, I finally got the point. And I would be, misleading if I didn't say I was, kind of dazzled by the prospect. It seemed, almost, stranger than reality that the President of the United States and the First Lady would be coming to me to sort of tell their story in an effort to get this all behind them. But I maintained as cool a professional demeanor as I could under the circumstances, and I said, well, I would think about it. I thought about it for about 5 minutes, and of course continued over the weekend, and then agreed to go down to the White House for what I thought would be a meeting with both the President and the First Lady, but it turned out to be just Mrs. Clinton, who I met with in the White House. As I mentioned in the book, I'd never been to the White House, even as a tourist, and it was, it was awe-inspiring to be led in, actually through the side, through the old executive office building. I met Maggie Williams, then she took me across through the Rose Garden into the ground floor, where, ironically, Mrs. Clinton was just finishing an interview with Bob Woodward for his book, The Agenda. So I saw him going out as I was led in. I didn't feel quite so flattered at that point, but still I figured, well, it's Bob Woodward, so I'm in pretty good company. We talked for about 90 minutes. I found her very charming and articulate. Some people have asked me, well, did I find her warm? And I guess warm is not the first word that comes to mind, but certainly extremely personable, very intelligent, very in command of the material, and someone who had obviously been thinking a good deal about this subject and the prospect of talking to a reporter. I guess what surprised me the most about this interview was that she didn't ask me more questions about myself and about how I would go about my work. It almost seemed that she was focusing more as if the decision had already been made to go forward, and she was just giving me her broad perspective on particularly the media coverage and these scandals that would not go away. And at one point she did turn to me and say, why is this Whitewater thing still hanging around us? It's such a small story, it's so insignificant, I can barely remember it, and yet it dogs us month after month, year after year. And I said, well, first of all, you've had the death of a high-level official in the White House under somewhat mysterious circumstances. I said, and then, for better or worse, papers were removed from his office, either the night of his death, the day after his death, and moved into the family quarters of the White House. I said, you're on your way to a good mystery story. And I said, the press and the public love a mystery, and a mystery story does not go away until the mystery is solved. I think the Kennedy story certainly is an illustration of that. And she seemed to agree with that, and I used that to encourage her to go forward, because I thought it was an admirable idea to open themselves up to a reporter, as they were proposing to do with me, in an effort to get this mystery behind them. She did say a few things that, with benefit of hindsight, strike me as more significant than they did at the time. She seemed, I can't remember her exact words, but she conveyed the idea that if only people understood how much she had given up and how much she had suffered on the road to getting to the White House to pursue a career in public service, that they would not be attacking her, they would not be questioning her integrity, and they would be accepting her representations about things more than the press was. And as a corollary to that, she particularly pointed to the recent publicity about Paula Jones and her allegations about a meeting in the Excelsior Hotel with then Governor Clinton. And she said, you know, people have no idea how painful it is for me to have to read these public accounts of my husband's alleged infidelities. She said, how could mainstream media take the word of someone like Paula Jones and print these allegations? And how would they not believe me when I, the First Lady, say that nothing of the sort ever happened? And while I could empathize with her distress and the discomfort, indeed, of having to read stories like that, it did strike me as a little bit naive that, in fact, in today's world, reporters don't take anyone's word for anything. They double-check everything that they can. And however sincere in her belief about what did or did not happen with Paula Jones, Mrs. Clinton was not a first-hand witness to any of those events. And the best she would know would be hearsay, and reporters naturally try to get to first-hand sources if they possibly can. We did talk at great length, though, that I would have to be independent, that this would not, in no sense, be an authorized account of these events. I made the point, and she readily agreed, that any other basis would not lend the work the credibility that she was looking for and wanted if this was, in fact, going to dispel some of the worst intimations of the reporting that had been done about this. And with that, I bid goodbye. I guess I'd stayed at about a half hour longer than my allotted time. I thought it had gone very well, and I was left to sort of wander out of the White House on my own. And this time I did come right out the front door where the Marine Band was organizing for some kind of ceremony, and sort of wandered down the lawn to the exit gate. Well, after that, we had several discussions. No immediate answer was forthcoming about whether this was in fact going to go forward or not. At one point, I got a call from Maggie Williams asking if I would put something in writing for the First Lady, much of what I had said in person, but expanding on that a little bit, and that she was then going to prepare a memo for the President. And I said, well, aren't they just going to talk about it? And she said, well, the President prefers to make decisions when he has something in writing. So I did that. I sent it down, and I understood that she was preparing a memo for him. Again, I heard nothing. Then I heard the President was having trouble making up his mind. I met with George Stephanopoulos. Finally, I think it was in July. This meeting in the White House was in April, and it was now July. And it was hard for me to sort of turn my attention back to my other work with this looming as this very exciting possibility. And I was growing increasingly uncomfortable for the reasons I had already discussed with Mrs. Clinton, that I would really wait for their official approval to begin work. So finally, I called one day to the White House and I said, I think I'll just go ahead and do this on my own, which is the way I would proceed in most stories or books anyway. And what's your reaction? And I did get a call back from Maggie Williams saying, oh, the First Lady was delighted by my decision, that, you know, they were having trouble making up their mind, but good that I had done it for them, and she would definitely cooperate, and that she believed that the President, while she couldn't speak for him, would also cooperate once the work was underway. Well, that turned out to be the high point of our collaboration, if you can call it that. None of this cooperation ever materialized. I do think that everyone was sincere. I can't conceive of any sort of strategy in which they would have approached me and suggested this and let it go as far as it did, only to have known in advance that they in fact never really wanted me to do such a book and never wanted to cooperate in it. I always felt, even until the manuscript went to press, that there would be some kind of cooperation with them, because if the whole premise of it in the first place was that cooperation demonstrated there was nothing to hide, what did lack of cooperation demonstrate? Of course, as the end neared, I realized how consistent this behavior was with many attempts of theirs to have dealt with Whitewater and related matters over the years. So what seems like a well-intentioned, if sometimes impulsive attempt to cooperate, to be honest, to get all of this out, to get it over with, and then layers of interference that arose, and ultimately a posture that was anything but cooperative or honest or forthcoming. In any event, I was never told that they had changed their minds. Nobody from the White House ever called and said, would you stop this project, or we think it was a big mistake, or we're not going to cooperate. Indeed, there would be vague promises that there would be a meeting after this foreign trip or that foreign trip. I went to Martha's Vineyard one summer where they were vacationing, thinking that that was going to be the time we would finally get together. I had encouraged them from the outset to talk to me earlier rather than later, noting that no matter how objective a reporter tries to be, that people you talk to earlier in the reporting process tend to gain a somewhat disproportionate influence over the way a story takes shape and is structured. And I have to say that as the months went by, none of these meetings ever materialized, and I went ahead and started doing reporting as I had indicated I would, talking to people in Arkansas and Washington, talking to people who had been in the administration and left, some people who were still in the administration. I began to find some growing anomalies between the official story that had been put forward from the White House and what I was finding to be the case. And certainly one of the first of these that I encountered was the notion that the Clintons were simply passive investors in the Whitewater real estate, which has really been the linchpin of their defense in this matter from the time it first arose in the 1992 campaign. But on the contrary, as I delved further into the story, I discovered that while that did seem to have been true in the initial beginnings of the Whitewater investment, it became less and less true as time went on. And certainly from late 1986, when their partners, the McDougal's empire, had, for all practical purposes, collapsed and the McDougal's had withdrawn to California, the Clintons were in charge of the Whitewater development, and specifically Mrs. Clinton was in charge of the Whitewater development, signing papers as president, negotiating bank loans with the bank, signing papers, and I uncovered a trove of documents that in fact demonstrated that this was the case. I think another signal event in terms of my the credibility that some of the statements from the White House had with me was a discussion about how the McDougal Savings and Loan Madison Guarantee had come to be a client of the Rose Law Firm. Now, as you read the story, you may agree with me that this is one of the more puzzling aspects of this story, because in fact, what difference does it make who brought in Madison Guarantee as a client of the Rose Firm in the great scheme of things? Yes, it may be mildly embarrassing if Hillary Clinton, the wife of the governor, was responsible for bringing in a state-regulated S&L as a client, but there's certainly no crime in it. And I'm sure that sort of thing goes on in one form or another all over the country, not necessarily with wives. I think Hillary Clinton is a groundbreaker in the sense that she's one of the first politicians' wives to have such a significant career. But when all is said and done, what is the big deal? Nonetheless, a White House lawyer took me aside, and in the guise of sharing a tremendous confidence and information that would be useful in my book, told me the whole story of how Rick Massey, a young associate at the firm, had gone to lunch with the CEO of Madison Guarantee and had landed this business, and that Hillary Clinton had then just been brought in because she did know McDougal and they needed to collect an overdue bill from him, and she had a very minor involvement in it. Well, in due course, I got around to calling Rick Massey just to check this story. And Rick Massey said, well, this was all news to him. He was like a 3-month associate at the law firm, and he couldn't conceive of the fact that he would have been able to land Madison Guarantee or any other client for that matter. Well, there was a partner at the firm at the same lunch where Rick Massey had supposedly landed it, so I called him for corroboration, and he too said, well, that's an astounding story. Nothing of the sort ever happened. In fact, at that very lunch, he told us quite clearly that Madison Guaranty already had a lawyer, Jim Guy Tucker, and they didn't need the Rose firm or anyone else to do their work. So there again, there was a glaring inconsistency almost from the beginning with the story that was being disseminated by the White House and what the evidence to me overwhelmingly suggested to be the case. And that by the way, is a dispute that continues to this day as the White House continues to insist that it was Rick Massey who finally got called before Congress and tried to sidestep the whole issue, but essentially said, I was just a young associate, not responsible for this. So as these credibility gaps arose, I, of course, did focus my attention on the sources I had who were talking, who were cooperating, and the result is what you see in the book Blood Sport. Now, I would like, since this is a bookstore and I assume you are all book lovers, that's partly why you're here, I hope you'll appreciate the fact that this is a book. It isn't something that I can sum up in a couple of sentences. And it's been fascinating to watch the sort of spin that has been put on it by the very political culture that this book does try to describe. Even before the book was published, much to my annoyance, the Washington Post managed to get a copy of it, quickly did a story skimming off some of the new information that was in it. Well, they dutifully called the White House for comment. And the White House said, well, we haven't read the book yet, but there's really nothing new in it. This is the same old story. And they later elaborated by adding, there's no smoking gun. Well, I wondered, now how could, by their own admission, not having read the book, why were they saying that? And why were people printing it, which they did? And that has generally been the line from very staunch supporters of the Clintons, that there is no smoking gun. I would agree there is no smoking gun, but life isn't filled with smoking guns. Detective fiction has smoking guns. And certainly, given the way this story started, I never expected there to be a smoking gun. Surely, had Hillary Clinton pulled the trigger on Vince Foster, they would not have been inviting a journalist in to do the story. On the other side, I was soon under attack from the right wing. In fact, I'm still reeling from a radio show I was on this afternoon where once again I was accused of being part of an elaborate conspiracy led by the Clintons to cover up the most heinous crimes of this administration, particularly the murder as opposed to suicide of Vince Foster. And this theory has it that I, in fact, did get enlisted by Susan Thomas's, and that Susan Thomas's is at home even now chortling over the success that she had in enlisting me in this conspiracy to cover up for the Clintons. And from that camp, I invariably get cross-examined by thousands of minute details of forensic evidence related to the death of Vince Foster, much of which I did pore over with a laborious and tedious and time-consuming effort when I was writing this section of the book, but I have to admit, I've forgotten a lot of it. You can't remember everything that backs up every line in a 479-page book. So I've had some unpleasant experiences being cross-examined by these zealous conspiracy theorists. But in fact, these attacks from both sides, I think, are completely consistent with the world that I describe in Bloodsport. Bloodsport was never intended to be an expose. It is a story, and it's filled, I think, with fascinating characters that certainly fascinated me. And I think it is a window. Whitewater, it's not even really about Whitewater. That is a window that I use in great detail to peer at the political culture that we live in today. I call it blood sport because I think that world, in many ways, is a blood sport today. It cost Vince Foster his life, which is maybe an aberrational and highly dramatic example. But you see across the political spectrum the ruined careers and the damaged lives that have resulted on the part of many people who simply came to Washington in the spirit of public service and soon found themselves swept up into a maelstrom of vicious attacks and counterattacks in which the weapons are falsehoods, distortions, evasions, and misstatements. And you see that across the political spectrum. That is not a partisan observation. It is not a partisan technique. It is a tactic, the ends justify the means, that I think have been embraced by too many politicians across the political spectrum. So I hope you will read the book and see it as a story, one that I think has embedded in it some, I hope, important lessons for our time. And I think if there's one lesson that overrides the others that emerge from this, at least in my mind, it is that there is not enough respect for the truth in our political culture today. And that perhaps the way to get out of this is at the ballot box to recognize those people who are candid, who are forthcoming, and who do show a respect for for the fundamental integrity that is necessary to sustain a healthy democracy. Thank you.
In a moment, Mr. Stewart will sign his book, and if everybody will please line up against the wall in single file and come in front of the blonde table for the book signing. Thank you. You
I'm so glad you're right.
You can get the book signed first and buy it later downstairs if you'd like. Thank you.
Telephone interviews so you can verify what you quote.
Do I tape them?
Yeah.
No.
It's not necessary to do so that you can verify that what you're saying in the book was in fact.
Oh, I mean with sources. Yeah. Oh yes, yes. In many cases I do. Yes, yes. I'm sorry. I thought you meant when people are interviewing me.
No. When you're interviewing them.
No, in many cases I do.
We're assuming it's okay for you to personalize.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
If you could just tell me.
And we'll do the title page. That's our.
Yes.
That's
No.
our
That's
normal.
where people like it, I think.
Can I get one or two shots with the book?
Sure.
Oh, you want to hold it?
He wants to hold the book.
This is it.
Okay. One more. That's it. Okay. Thank you. You want to step up?
Once again, we're forming one line beginning at the far corner of the table and heading straight down the wall with the windows. If you haven't purchased your books already, you may get them signed first before you take them to the first floor cashier. And for those of you in line waiting to get your book signed, if you'd like to have your book personalized,
Thank you. Thank you.
we're
so much.
sending someone down the line with Post-its.
Hi.
All you need to do is put the Post-it opposite the page you want Mr. Stewart to sign, and have the book open
Well, I
like
didn't make
so
a
when you
lot of it, but
approach the table. On the Post-it should be written your name or the name of the person you want to get the book
I don't know
signed
yet.
to.
I'll have to see.
So
I do
you
have
can
a
have
lot
your
of
books
work
open just
on
like
it,
this
so
when you get
I'll
to
probably
the
do
table.
something with it. Yeah. Do you want a book? Okay. Sure.
This is for Jim.
I really enjoyed that.
Well, thank you.
Did you
I feel like this as
Did you
well.
want a
Thank
book?
you.
No.
Will, hi. Hi. Good to see you.
I was
Nice
just
to
thinking
see
it
you.
was just it seemed like it was the other
Familiar
day that we were
face.
around the corner and you were talking about starting the book. I can't believe you
Can you
got it
believe
done.
it? I did.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Good to see you, Will. Let's chat sometime.
Just a signature?
Just a
for you?
signature.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
Very good book.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure you heard that many.
Well, you can't hear too much.
You think a student of yours? She told me that you were signing today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In Columbia, this?
Yes, Dina. Dina
Oh,
Yellen.
right. Yeah, right.
Stuart Elliott from Royce Carlton.
Hi, Elliot. Oh, hi. Hi. Good to see you. Is it 2 L's, 1 T? 2 T's?
Carlton wants to send their regards, and how's everything going? How's it going?
It was fun. It was just exhausting.
I saw your schedule. It's unbelievable.
It was unbelievable.
Nice to see you soon.
Hi. I've been meaning to call you. Erica, how
I'm
nice
sure
to
you're great to
see you. And
Thank you.
congratulations.
you.
It's so
This is my husband,
exciting.
Eric.
Hi, Eric. Nice to meet you.
In your spare time one day, this is
Oh, well, that's so nice of you. So nice of you. You know, I wanted to tell you that I got a letter after this book came out from my first piano teacher, who's having the 50th anniversary of teaching. And I can't be there for that, but I promise that I will play a piece for her.
How's your piano?
It's wonderful.
505,
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I can play things on there I could never play before. It is fantastic.
Doing duets still for him?
Still doing the duets, yes.
Wonderful.
It's wonderful to see you.
Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There you go. Hope you like it. Thanks. Hi. You are? Oh, great. Thank you. Hi.
Looking forward to your dance.
Yeah, I hope you
Very
enjoy
much
it.
enjoyed your first before.
Thank you. Hi.